George Jung's real-life story is as fascinating as it gets, a story that isn't just jaw-dropping on the big screen, but also in reality. Jung, the main figure in Blow, was right at the heart of the American cocaine market. His life is the ultimate live fast, die young saga. Here's a breakdown of George Jung's life story, in all its shocking twists and turns. George Jung was born in 1942 to a regular American family. His dad was a small business owner, and his mom was a pretty ambitious woman, always dreaming of a more luxurious life. Growing up, George saw a lot of conflict at home, money problems, arguments, the dullness of ordinary life. This pushed him to seek something more exciting. In the late 1960s, George moved to California and was quickly drawn to the free-spirited beach culture. This was when he first started selling marijuana. What began as harmless dealing soon turned into something much bigger, especially with the money rolling in fast. From small-time deals, he built a large network, supplying marijuana from California all the way to the East Coast. A few years later, George got busted during a marijuana run and did a short prison stint, but this would end up changing his life. While in prison, George met an inmate who introduced him to the cocaine business in Colombia. At the time, cocaine was fresh and exotic in the U.S., which made it a huge opportunity. When he got out, George set his sights on a bigger score, the cocaine trade. He traveled to Colombia to build connections, eventually meeting the king of cocaine himself, Pablo Escobar. This connection made George one of the top cocaine suppliers in the U.S. George developed his own routes to smuggle cocaine from Colombia to the U.S. At first, he used airlines, but as the operation grew, so did the scale of his deals, bringing millions of dollars of cocaine into the country. Essentially, George organized the U.S. distribution for Escobar's Medellin cartel. During the peak of the 1980s coke craze, George's system was behind every bag of cocaine found in clubs, on street corners, everywhere. But with all this money came a loss of control. Luxury cars, huge houses, non-stop parties, this was George's new normal. He was making so much cash that he had to come up with special ways to count and store it, but the price of this high life was steep. Escobar's power struggles, rivalries with other drug lords, and the relentless pressure from law enforcement made George's life a lot more dangerous. By the late 1980s, the heat was on, and even George's closest allies were getting harder to trust. George's downfall was fast and brutal. Friends who once trusted him turned on him, and his closest business partners betrayed him. In 1994, after hitting rock bottom, he was arrested again and sentenced to a long prison term. By that time, he'd lost everything: his money, family, and reputation. In prison, he was left alone with nothing but memories of his glory days. In 2014, George was released from prison, but he wasn't the young, flashy drug lord anymore. All those wild, flashy years were gone, and his legacy as America's cocaine king was just a story. After prison, he lived with the regrets of his past until he passed away in 2021. George Jung's life is a hard lesson in greed, ambition, and the brutal costs of chasing money and power. Blow captures a lot of this wild story, but in real life, George's rise and fall were even harsher and more tragic. His life remains one of the most unforgettable examples of how the glamorous side of crime usually ends in isolation and loss.